So first of all, let's kind of just remind ourselves why we're here today. And this is actually going to be the 20th year, the 20th anniversary of the Managing Partner Forum Awards. And in a way, that's fantastic, but in a way, it's a little bit depressing, and I'll explain why. Because the theme for these awards consistently has been that management, and management of professional services firms in particular, has a pretty fundamental contribution to the success of any professional service firm. And therefore, those who are responsible in key management roles, they should be recognized for that contribution. And what I think is a little bit sad is that 20 years on, we're still pushing the same message, which is, hey, here is a great opportunity for you to enter one of these awards, ideally to win, but even to get shortlisted is pretty good. And then that gives you almost like internal ammunition to show the partners, to show other people at your firm that actually what you're doing is amazing. They know it anyway, I'm sure, but it's really quite important, I think, to have some independent, external validation, if that's the right word, of your entry. So Andrew, who's with me today, is the chair of judges, and he'll be talking in a minute about what that external validation is all about, the independent role that the judges play, and how they go about their work. I just really wanted to run briefly through the awards and explain broadly how they work for those that haven't had the opportunity to participate in them before. If you've looked at the guidelines, which hopefully you will have seen, they've been circulated a month or so now, you will notice that what's very unusual about these awards is that we're not bringing you a set of categories. Most awards that you come across, you will be given a set of categories, and then you somehow have to shoehorn your submission to make it fit within that category. We think that's unhelpful. And the reason that we think that's unhelpful is because most projects that we come across in professional firms are teamwork. They don't just involve one section, whether it's marketing or HR or finance. They actually involve a group of people coming together around a project and achieving success. So what we felt was that it was therefore more important to almost go back to something as basic as your timesheet and say, well, how are you spending your time? And broadly, there are only 3 areas you can spend your time in, apart from holidays maybe, and illness if someone's got COVID, like poor Andrew has. But more importantly, there are 3 areas are, firstly, clients. In other words, spending time on clients. Could be paid, could be unpaid, but it's spending time on clients. The second area is, let's call it the business. In other words, spending time on the business, spending time on things that build the brand, things that make sure that you have the information you need, whether for internal purposes or government or anybody else. And the third area is community. In other words, are you actually contributing to your local community? Now, that could be doing something very local. It could be a CSR project. It has a range of different areas. So what we kind of thought, well, if that's the case, then what we actually could do with these awards is invite people to enter for what we call a theme. And there are 3 of them around clients, business, and community, as you probably worked out. And then we then go through, or Andrew and I then go through all the entries. And we don't just look at them from the obvious issue of, are they of a sufficient quality to be shortlisted at the beginning? But we also look at, well, are there any categories emerging? Are there any areas emerging on which there is convergence amongst those various entries? So we can then create the categories and then allocate them to the entries after we've received them. Now, we've done this a couple of years now. This is the 3rd year, and it actually works very well. What I did this year as well was I've added into what we call our indicative themes, and we include those in the guidelines. So these are areas that typically we think might well emerge as categories. And what I've done there is included those that were actually used last year. Now, we do know from the past that a number of winners have actually entered, and I could never have written the category term to describe their entry, but when the judges saw it, they said, that's a winner. So that flexibility is something that we think is really helpful. So instead of trying to shoehorn your words into something that fits around our category descriptions, we're giving you a much broader canvas to play on. And hopefully that will give you the flexibility to look at those projects that don't immediately fit into one discipline or the other within your firm. I think that's probably about enough from me to kind of kick the ball up rolling. I'll mention that we are starting it off today, launch now, which is great, that your entries have to be in by the end of next month. That's the end of February. We then need to do some time to do our work. So we will come up with a shortlist about the beginning of April, thereabouts. And then obviously the ceremony itself is in June, as it was last year. And hopefully, well, I know it will be in the same online space, unless, of course, life changes completely, in which case we might hopefully venture back into the in-person world. But let's take it step by step, because life is a little bit complex at the moment, I think, to make that decision. So I think that's probably enough from me. So I'll now, if I may, pass you back to Andrew, and who's going to talk a bit about his role as chair of judges. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Richard. And yeah, as Richard said, I have the privilege of having COVID at the moment. So if I start coughing, I apologise in advance. I'm delighted again to be chairing the panel of judges. I've been involved with the awards since 2006, I think. Initially as a judge, and then since 2017 as chair of judges. And I've never failed to be impressed by the quality of the entries, by the the thought that goes into them, and over the past few years, the way in which the awards have developed, and the innovation, I guess, that Richard's brought to the table in terms of the themes. I sort of talk a little bit about the actual the way in which you go about the judging process and the criteria. Each award is judged by generally 4 judges, certainly a minimum of 3. The way in which we approach that is to really hunt out subject matter experts, people who are close to the action, who are seeing how the world's changing, and are able to give some really insightful evaluations. Each judge for each category is asked to personally score independently every shortlisted entry, and that's based on a consistent template. So again, we're making sure there's a rigor around that whole process. Having done that, they then meet and discuss the scores they've given and assess the entries. And that may mean that certain judges change their views, certain entries which perhaps were not as highly ranked move up the ranking, or vice versa. But at the end of that, they come to a conclusion, they come to a recommendation, challenge each other, but ultimately they agree, and those recommendations come forward to a meeting of the judging panel, which I chair, where they are presented, they're challenged, they're discussed, they're ratified, and that's the process by which we demonstrate rigor and ensure that every entry that's shortlisted is examined in quite a forensic and objective way. The criteria that are applied, there are 6 criteria, and those criteria are all equally weighted. What are the criteria? You'll see, I'm sure, from the entry form and from the website, but just to rehearse that, the first is strategic alignment. And I guess if you look at people like Jim Collins, what Jim Collins will say is that great strategy is 1% vision and 99% alignment. So we're really keen to see the alignment point there. Active leadership engagement. This is something in which the leaders of the organisation, the leaders of the firm, are actively involved in. We're looking at innovation. Innovation in terms of services, innovation in terms of markets, methods, systems. So that broad spectrum of innovation, of doing something different, doing something better, bringing something new to the table. Education of stakeholders, again, really important component in terms of how we assess the entries. And actually, where's the positive experience? Where's the positive impact on client experience, on employee engagement, on stakeholder performance? We need evidence of that. And ultimately, is there a measurable impact against goals in a reasonable time scale? I guess one of the pieces of feedback we get from judges on an annual basis is, we really need to see the proof points. We really need to see demonstrable progress. We really need to see hard facts. We can all write. We're all good writers. We can all create a very powerful narrative. But what really carries weight is demonstrable evidence, KPIs being achieved, and signs of success. That's the process, if you like. I really encourage your firms, to engage with this and to enter the awards. Nothing more from me for the moment. Richard, back over to you.
Great. I mean, one of the other elements that we introduced a couple of years ago is what we call the best in theme categories. And because we have a very rigorous process of if you like, a standard process effectively by which the judging takes place, we actually are able to then look across all the entries for the theme, all the categories that we've created for that theme, to identify which is the entry that has gained the most either points or however else we measure it. And then so it's entirely possible for a firm to win not just once, but twice with the same entry.